Want to see more cool videos on our channel? We do, so press this bell and enable to send notifications.
Sometimes the memories and the experiences we've had in our home makes them worth way more than the millions offered in return to the property. That must have been the case with at least a few of these stubborn homeowners who refused to budge when pushed by governments and corporations to sell their property. While some of the houses merged with the environment in a particularly quirky way, the others stand out high and proud in the middle of roads and under bridges. Number 10. The Gate Tower Building, Osaka. This 16-story office building looks like any other in Osaka's dense downtown, save for one thing. There's a highway passing through it. In 1983, the government made plans to expand the Osaka section of the Hanshin Expressway, but discovered a problem. They needed a parcel of land for an exit ramp, and the owners were not interested in selling. The family had run a charcoal and lumber company there since the 19th century. While those buildings were deteriorating, they wanted to build a new modern office tower. The two parties settled in for negotiations, 5 years of them. They finally came to an agreement. The government would grant the owners the permits necessary to build their tower, but only if it could run its highway through part of it. Today, the Hanshin Expressway is listed as the tenant of the building's 5th, 6th, and 7th floors, and office workers toil in the rest of the heavily soundproofed building. Number 9. Vera Cohen. Not many people have gone up against President Donald Trump in business and won. However, retired homeowner and widow Vera Cohen did just that. To show how that happened, let's go back to the beginning. In the early 1980s, Cohen tangled with Bob Guccione, the founder of Penthouse magazine. Guccione wanted to build a casino, and Cohen's house was in the way. He offered $1 million. She refused, and Bob purchased the surrounding properties and started building. However, Bob ran out of money, and construction halted in 1980. The area remained vacant until 1994, when Trump purchased the land which is next to his Atlantic casino, intending to build a parking lot. Again, Vera held out, refusing to let the legal battle cower. Surprisingly, she won the legal battle, and now her house stands tall, complete with all its history, next to Trump's Plaza. Number 8. Spiegel Halters Jewelry and Clock Store. The British architectural critic Ian Narn called Spiegel Halters Jewelry Shop in East London the best visual joke in the city, a perennial triumph for the little man, the blokes who won't conform. In the 1920s, the small family-owned shop, in operation since the early 19th century, refused to sell to Wickham's department store, which had expanded so much that it owned all the buildings surrounding Spiegel Halters, and wanted to expand even more by creating a grander structure that would swallow it. The jewelry store owners wouldn't budge, and Wickham's had to be built around it, making an off-kilter building with a tower that was supposed to rise from its center position off to one side. Number 7. RealLife Storybook. No real estate holdout is as comical as that of Mary Cook. In the 1900s, Mary Cook and her husband Ferdinand Hunting Cook and 5 children settled in West End Avenue. In particular, they resided in house number 249. They lived a good life until January of 1913, when suddenly a windstorm injured Ferdinand, and he died a month later. Mary held onto the house and continued to raise their children. In 1915, developers who wished to build modern apartments approached her. She refused to sell, but some of her neighbors did. In 1916, developers built huge apartments to the north of Mary's house. Again in 1924, developers approached Mary, and again she refused to sell. Consequently, developers acquired the houses to the south of Mary's house, demolished them, and built gigantic apartments. That resulted in Mary's Narrow being sandwiched between 2 giant buildings. The result was something similar to an illustration from a children's book. Till today, though, Mary passed on in 1932, her house stands as a relic surrounded by modernity. Number 6. Sacred Native American Ground. For nearly 50 years, 65-year-old Ishmael Bermudez, also known as Golden Eagle, has lived in his Miami home, which he believes sits atop sacred Native American ground. He has been excavating his backyard, discovering a natural spring, and what he hopes to be Native American artifacts. When skyscrapers, construction, and businesses began cropping up around his colorfully painted wooden house, Bermudez refused to sell unless developers could guarantee the preservation of the sacred ground. Even though he has been offered $1.8 million for the home, he continues to refuse until he can be assured that the land will be protected. Number 5. half house. In a town with intriguingly built structures like the Cube House, the Elephant House, and the Doll House, it could be said that nothing is as odd as the appropriately named half house. Built sometime in the late 19th century, a Victorian-era row house was constructed on St. Patrick's Street in the middle of Toronto. Originally, the duplex was part of 6 interconnected houses that made up the street. However, in the 1950s, a real estate developer, Windlass Holdings Limited, started buying the houses in that region with the aim of redevelopment. Most homeowners caved to the pressure and sold their houses, but the owner of this particular house declined all offers. When the developers realized that nothing they could offer would convince the homeowner to sell, they left him alone and tore down the rest of the houses. The developers had to be incredibly careful when tearing down the houses because they could not afford to damage the rest of the building. Eventually, the load-bearing wall that had helped separate the interconnected houses became a blank exterior when the developers finished demolishing. Since then, the house has remained half a house. Coincidentally, that particular house bears the number 54.5, and it bore that number even before demolition. Number 4. Highway Hurdle. In 2015, construction workers were forced to build a $15 million road around 2 apartment blocks in China after several families refused to move. The embarrassing rebuke by the 10 households forced developers to curve the major new route around the properties in the city of Yongjia in eastern China's Zhejiang province. Officials launched the multi-million-dollar-pound blueprint to much fanfare, saying the new 10-mile provincial road would provide a fast and efficient route between the city and 19 surrounding villages. But although work started in December 2011, construction was forced to stop when 10 families refused to accept the compensation offered to allow their properties to be demolished. This year, local council officials lost their patience and ordered the road builders to go around the properties. The 4-lane highway opened last month, with many drivers arguing the bizarre layout is dangerous. In China, it is common practice to ask people to move out of their homes to make way for important public sector developments. People who refuse are known as nail homeowners, a term which comes from the nuisance a nail causes when stuck in a fence post. The homeowners say they are happy to move, but only if they are offered a fair price so they can afford a new property and be compensated for the inconvenience of leaving homes where they were perfectly happy. Number 3. Nail houses. This 3-story house in Jiangsu City, Henan Province, is one of many examples of nail houses in China, or dingzhu in Chinese, where homeowners refuse to accept compensation from a developer for its demolition. As a result, 4 lanes of traffic on the Zhengzhou motorway are forced to squeeze into 2, with cars having to cross the double yellow lines into oncoming traffic in order to bypass the inconveniently located property. Images emerged recently showing the 1,000 square meter, 11,000 square foot property bizarrely perched across the motorway after the owners refused to sell up. Number 2. Tygo House. In 2011, lawyer Randall Acker did what most people wish they could do, but cannot. He went up against a big corporation and won. He emerged victorious after a long legal battle, and as a result, he was able to hold on to a small Queen Anne-style house, which he nicknamed Tygo House after his dog. Lacking another option, the developers built the intended residence hall for Portland State University around the house. Though initially hesitant, the university officials and construction eventually warmed up to their new neighbor. So much so, when Acker celebrated his win by tying balloons to the house when the aim of creating the scene from the movie Up, the construction crew joined in. Acker noted that the reason he didn't want to sell was that the building was the perfect location for his law practice. It was close to downtown, and it had easy access to the freeway. Moreover, the house, which was once surrounded by Victorian houses, carried with it a lot of history. Number 1. A Time Capsule. Kevin Palmer, a resident of Port Melbourne, Australia, left behind a time capsule from a different era when he passed on at age 88 in 2016. Kevin was a homeowner who refused to sell his home despite mounting pressure from developers. According to his sister, developers once offered $800,000, but he was stubborn and loved his house. As a result, the developers bought the neighboring properties and built high-rise apartments that ended up surrounding Mr. Palmer's house. Weeks after Mr. Palmer's death, the house sold for $1.38 million. It's still unclear what the buyer will do with the house, but at the moment, the house remains one of the most historic buildings in that area of Melbourne. The house also shines a spotlight on the gentrification that's been ongoing for the past 20 years in Melbourne. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please let me know by clicking the like button. Do share, write a comment, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch up my next video.